You know, I thought I'd seen it all when it came to HOA overreach. I'd heard the whispered legends of lawn height violations, the forbidden paint colors, the clandestine gnome removals. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day my local HOA decided to wage war on my shed. Not just any shed, mind you. It's my unassuming, perfectly innocent-looking backyard shed that, unbeknownst to them, contained what could only be described as a matter of national security. Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. Because this story, folks, is going to redefine your understanding of suburban warfare. I suspect I might hold the world record for the shortest distance between a homeowner's quiet sanctuary and a federal incident. It's a tale that proves even the most benign structures can hide secrets. And even the most petty tyrants can stumble into a legal quagmire so deep they need a submarine to get out. My name is Arthur Finch, though most just call me Art. I'm a man who appreciates quiet. After decades in what I can only vaguely describe as applied theoretical sciences for various government agencies, I retired to a quaint little community called Maplewood Gardens. It had everything: mature trees, reasonable distances between houses, and, crucially, the promise of peace and anonymity. My biggest concern was the perfect ripeness of my backyard tomatoes, not whether my garden hose was coiled at the regulation angle. And then there was the shed. From the outside, it was a perfectly respectable 10 by 12 foot custom-built structure. Painted a calming sage green, it blended seamlessly with the verdant backdrop of my backyard. To the casual observer, it was a place for tools, maybe a lawnmower, some potting soil. To me, it was the culmination of 30 years of my life's work. Inside, shielded by layers of insulation, soundproofing, and very subtle, very expensive security, was my bio-reactor. A compact, incredibly efficient device designed to convert atmospheric carbon directly into clean, usable energy with zero emissions. It was revolutionary, it was fragile, and it was, by design, classified. My quiet retirement was less about napping and more about perfecting this miracle. I had a special permit for it, renewed annually by a very specific, very quiet federal department, granting me exemptions from various local codes for critical infrastructure research. The shed, you see, wasn't just a shed. It was a mini, highly sensitive, off-grid research facility. Enter Beverly Sterling. Bev, as she insisted on being called, was our HOA president. She was a woman who saw the world in shades of beige and approved trims. And anything that deviated from her vision of suburban perfection was, by definition, an affront. She probably saw herself as a visionary, a guardian of property values. I saw her as someone who had far too much time on her hands and an inexplicable obsession with everyone else's fences. Her eyebrows were perfectly sculpted, like tiny, angry caterpillars planning world domination, and she had a habit of arriving unannounced, clipboard in hand, her smile plastered on, a cheap veneer over a house of cards. My first encounter with Bev regarding the shed was, predictably, a notice. A crisp, official-looking document tucked into my mailbox, citing unapproved accessory structure, non-standard color, and excessive footprint. I read it, chuckled, and then dutifully submitted the necessary architectural plans. Along with a note explaining the purpose of the structure was private scientific research, federally approved, and politely reminding them of the community's established setback rules, which my shed perfectly adhered to. That should have been the end of it. It was not. A week later, another notice arrived. This one was more aggressive. It demanded an internal inspection of the shed, citing potential health and safety hazards and unverified usage. It was signed, in a flourish, by Bev herself. I responded, again politely, that an internal inspection was not possible due to the sensitive nature of the research, reiterating its federal protection. I offered to provide external measurements and proof of a certified, licensed contractor for its construction. Bev didn't like that, at all. I could feel her escalating frustration from across the neighborhood. She started dropping by more frequently, ostensibly to admire my hydrangeas. But her eyes would always dart to the shed, scrutinizing its every angle as if she could X-revision her way through the walls. She'd ask thinly veiled questions about my hobbies, or that little project. I'd offer vague, pleasant answers, completely unintimidated. After all, what could she really do? The shed became the hot topic at the next HOA meeting. I didn't attend, but my neighbor, a lovely woman named Eleanor, who secretly kept a dozen rescue cats beyond the HOA's 2-pet limit, gave me the full rundown. Their argument was a symphony of passive aggression, with only the neighbors applauding. She whispered, describing how Bev had ranted about eyesores, unregulated structures, and the sanctity of property values. Apparently, Bev brought in some sort of legal advisor, a fellow who wore confidence like a slightly ill-fitting toupee, noticeable but doing its job, who spouted bylaws like ancient incantations. He reportedly advised the board that my refusal to allow an inspection was grounds for immediate demolition, citing a rarely used community nuisance clause. I got the formal letter a few days later, a final notice. Demolition scheduled for 2 weeks from the date of the letter if internal access wasn't granted. It was absurd. I called the federal department. My contact, a dry but very efficient man named Agent Davies, chuckled. Mr. Finch, they cannot legally touch your shed. You have an active federal permit. Any interference would be considered obstruction of critical national research. We've sent them multiple certified letters outlining this already. They're ignoring them, Agent Davies, I told him, or they're simply not reading them. Indeed, he sighed. Sometimes the biggest obstacles aren't geopolitical, but bureaucratic stubbornness. He assured me they would send another letter, this one with even stronger language. I waited. The demolition date drew closer. I watched Bev from my window, zooming around on her golf cart, which she treated like a PayPal chariot, giving her a sense of elevated authority. I saw her pointing at my shed to other board members, their heads nodding in agreement. It was clear. Agent Davies' sternly worded letters were either lost in the mail or, more likely, simply ignored by an HOA board that operated with the ruthless efficiency of a tiny, unyielding corporation, convinced of its own absolute power. I knew then I needed to prepare. I subtly upgraded the shed's external security cameras. These weren't for recording trespassers. They were for documenting a very public, very foolish mistake. I made sure the footage would stream directly to a secure, off-site server. I also made a very specific, very important call to Agent Davies, letting him know the scheduled demolition date. Just a heads up, Agent, I said. They seem intent on proceeding. Understood, Mr. Finch, he replied, his voice unreadable. Will be monitoring the situation. The night before the scheduled demolition, I went into the shed. The bio-reactor hummed softly, a symphony of contained power. I ran diagnostics, ensured everything was secure, and then I locked it up, triple-checking every bolt. I knew tomorrow would be interesting. I even put out a fresh pot of coffee on my porch, right next to my favorite rocking chair. If they were going to put on a show, I might as well have a front row seat. The next morning dawned bright and clear, almost mockingly perfect. Around 8 a.m., the first sign of trouble appeared. A flatbed truck towing a mini excavator trundling down our quiet street. It pulled up directly across from my driveway, followed by 2 pickup trucks filled with burly-looking men in work uniforms. Then, the golf cart. Bev. She stepped out, adjusting the expensive pastel pantsuit she favored for her official duties. Beside her was the same legal advisor from the HOA meeting. A man whose advice was like a public restroom widely available, but you probably shouldn't use it. He carried a briefcase, looking entirely too smug for 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Bev strode up my driveway, clipboard in hand, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. The demolition crew started setting up, the excavator rumbling to life. "Good morning, Mr. Finch," Bev announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. As per our final notice, we are here today to proceed with the demolition of your unapproved structure. I trust you've removed all your personal belongings. I slowly sipped my coffee. Good morning, Bev. You know, I actually haven't. And I must reiterate, for the final time, that any attempt to interfere with my shed will have severe repercussions. It contains federally protected research. You do not have the legal authority for this. Bev scoffed. Oh, Arthur, don't be ridiculous. Federally protected research. Are you building a rocket to the moon in there? We've consulted with our legal team. We have every right to ensure community standards are upheld. This shed is a blight. Her lawyer nodded sagely, adjusting his tie. It's not a rocket, Bev, I replied, my voice calm, almost bored. It's far more important than that. And your legal team is about to cost you, and this HOA, more money than you've ever seen. You've been warned, repeatedly. Warnings go both ways, Arthur, she retorted, gesturing to the excavator. Proceed, gentlemen. The excavator driver, a burly fellow with a chewing tobacco bulge in his cheek, grinned and swung the arm of the machine, slowly pivoting it towards my shed. The bucket, a claw of cold steel, hovered ominously. Bev folded her arms, her head held high, clearly relishing the moment. Her smile was plastered on, a cheap veneer over a house of cards. And then it happened. From down the street, almost silently at first, came two black SUVs. Not just any SUVs, the kind with tinted windows, subtle government plates, and an unmistakable aura of official business. They pulled up swiftly, forming a blockade between the excavator and my shed. The men in work uniforms looked at each other, confused. The excavator's engine sputtered, then died. The doors of the SUVs opened simultaneously. Out stepped a contingent of individuals in dark suits, some with earpieces, all radiating an air of calm authority. Agent Davies was among them, his expression as dry as ever. He walked directly up to Bev, who suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her confident posture crumbled. Ms. Sterling, I presume. Agent Davies' voice was quiet, but it carried an undeniable weight. Yes, that's me, Bev stammered, her voice suddenly high-pitched. Who? ... Who are you people? Davies presented a badge, briefly. Agent Davies, Federal Department of Applied Sciences. We're here to cease and desist all activity related to this property immediately. You are attempting to interfere with a federally classified research project. He then gestured to his colleagues, who were now approaching the demolition crew, displaying their own badges. You and your board have received multiple notifications regarding the protected status of Mr. Finch's research. Your continued disregard constitutes obstruction of a federal operation and potentially endangerment of critical national infrastructure. This is a federal offense, Ms. Sterling. The lawyer with the ill-fitting toupee tried to interject. Now, hold on, Agent. This is a local matter. HOA bylaws. Agent Davies cut him off, his voice hardening. There are no HOA bylaws that supersede federal law, sir, especially not when national security is involved. Your client and this HOA board are now under investigation for obstruction, willful destruction of federal property, and potentially treasonous negligence given the nature of the project inside that shed. I suggest you advise your client to cooperate fully, starting with calling off your crew and providing us with all records related to this incident. Bev's face went from pale to ghastly. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by pure terror. The demolition crew, already looking bewildered, quickly started packing up their tools, wisely wanting no part of this. One of the agents walked over to my shed, producing a small device, and scanned the door. The shed, once the target of HOAIR, was now under federal protection. I just sat there, sipping my coffee, watching the drama unfold. The neighborhood, usually quiet, was now buzzing. Neighbors peered from behind curtains, cell phones subtly recording the scene. Bev Sterling, the queen of Maplewood Gardens, was being read her rights. The same legal advisor who had spouted empty bylaws was now frantically whispering into her ear, his confidence having completely evaporated. It turned out his advice really was like a public restroom, widely available, but you definitely shouldn't use it. The aftermath was, in a word, glorious. Bev and the key members of the HOA board were taken in for questioning. The local police, who had initially been called by Bev about my unapproved structure, quickly deferred to the federal agents. The sheer scale of the charges they were facing, from obstruction to endangering a critical scientific project, was staggering. The news broke quickly, not just locally, but nationally. HOA attempts to demolish secret federal bioreactor. Read one headline. Another, Suburban Karen accused of treasonous negligence. Overshed spat. The community was in an uproar. Many neighbors who had silently suffered under Bev's reign came forward with their own stories of overreach and harassment. Eleanor, my cat-loving neighbor, even started a petition for a full audit of the HOA's finances, which, predictably, uncovered years of questionable expenditures and outright embezzlement. It turned out the ant colony operated with the ruthless efficiency of a tiny, unyielding corporation. But they weren't just after my shed. They were lining their own pockets. The HOA board was dissolved. New elections were held, and a much more reasonable, homeowner-friendly group took the reins. Bev Sterling and her cronies faced fines, probation, and public humiliation. The charges of endangering critical infrastructure were eventually lessened, but the message was clear. You don't mess with federal property, especially when it's disguised as a garden shed. As for my shed, it now has a small, discreet plaque near the door, simply stating, Federal Research Facility, authorized access only. It's still my quiet sanctuary, the heart of my work, but now it also serves as a permanent, undeniable monument to the day a petty HOA president tried to destroy a national secret and, in doing so, spectacularly destroyed herself. It just goes to show you never truly know what your neighbor is up to. And sometimes the quietest people are harboring the biggest secrets. And for every HOA that thinks it can run roughshod over its residents, remember Art Finch and his shed. Stand your ground, document everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the feds will show up to help you out. If you've had your own battles with an overzealous HOA, share your stories in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this wild ride. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of suburban chaos and unexpected justice.